Hi guys, it's Elissa at Moat Cottage, and today I'm going to show you how I set up my Presto Pressure Canner. This is a pressure canner. It's a large capacity pressure vessel designed for home canning of meats, seafood, vegetables, fruits. The canner uses pressure to achieve the high temperatures required for safely processing food while canning. And it's the only safe method of canning low acid foods, which is your vegetables, meats, poultry, fish. It's important to follow a few rules when using and caring for our pressure canners, so let's get to know our canner. When you first get your pressure canner, it's going to be in pieces, so I'm going to show you how you put it together and I'll explain what each piece does as we put it together. This is a 21 litre, 23 gallon Presto Pressure Canner, and this is the base, the lid and the sealing ring, and the base and the lid is made out of aluminium, so it's a soft metal, but it makes it a lot lighter to handle. If you're starting out with a brand new canner, congratulations! First up, you're going to need to wash your base, lid and sealing ring with warm soapy water to get rid of the manufacturing oils. You don't want those oils getting into your food. I think the handles are already on the pressure canner, but if you need to tighten them up, just use a Phillips head screwdriver. Because the canner is made from aluminium, it's a soft metal, so you don't want to strip the thread when you're tightening screws up. So just be mindful not to tighten it up too tight. Inside the canner here is the locking bracket. Now this is really cool because this actually prevents the lid from being taken off when it's at pressure. So this part is the bottom of the air vent or cover lock. And what happens is when it's at pressure, it rises up and it hits against the locking bracket so it cannot open, which is a really good safety feature. The Presto Pressure Canner has a sealing ring, and this fits inside the lid to form the seal. Every time I use my canner, I put some vegetable oil on my sealing ring, and to do that, all I do is add a little bit of vegetable oil to my hand and I get it up onto my fingers. So I just put my fingers up into there. Then I just coat the sealing ring with the oil on the inside and the outside by pulling it through my hand. This prolongs the life of the sealing ring by stopping it from drying out and getting brittle. It also eases the opening and closing of the canner. It would definitely be a good idea to have a spare one of these on hand because it is an item that will deteriorate eventually and you will need to replace it. And then we just place it in the lid and get it under every tab. Next we have the vent pipe. It's the primary pressure relief valve and it releases the pressure in excess of 15 pounds. The vent pipe goes in this hole here. So if you've got the 3 holes across, it's the one up the top there. We place the thread side into the canner and then holding onto it, turning it upside down, we screw this bottom part on, holding both sides so you can get it nice and tight, finger tight. Okay. Now if you look down the vent pipe, you can see through it, you can see the table behind it. And it's really important that this always stays clear. Now to try and clear it out, you can always blow. You can feel that the air is blowing through that vent pipe. So there's 2 ways, looking and blowing through it to make sure it's clear. You want to do that every time you can because you don't want to start canning with a blocked vent pipe. What will happen if it does get blocked while you're canning? The overpressure plug, which is what we're about to put in, will pop out and let the pressure out, which means your pressure will drop in your canner and you will have to start the whole process again because your canning time will be wrecked. It's a really simple yet effective safety feature so that the lid doesn't build up so much pressure that it's going to explode off into the roof. And we've all heard those horror stories from great grandma's era, but we don't have to worry about that so much. This is the overpressure plug. It's a little black plug and it's got the word top on it. It goes in this position here and we just turn the lid over and we just pop it in like that and then the word top is on top. The overpressure plug is another part that will eventually need to be replaced. These 3 parts make up the air vent or cover lock and they have a gasket, and the gasket goes on just like that. Now this is a perishable part. It's important for this white gasket to be in good condition and in place so the air vent lock can seal completely and the pressure canner doesn't lose pressure when canning. The air vent goes in this position here, and this is the part that goes inside the canning lid that I was telling you about earlier, and we just place that big round bit there and screw this part onto the thread until it's nice and tight, and I'm holding both sides so that it doesn't just spin, and it needs to be finger tight. Like, you don't need tools for this. When the canner's under pressure, that will pop up, so you have a visual indicator of the pressure that's built up inside the canner. So when it's inside the canner, it's like this. When it builds up pressure, that pops up like that. And this is the part that will prevent you from opening the lid when it's under pressure, which I think is so cool, because you don't want to get burnt accidentally trying to take the lid off too soon. The dial gauge is a really precision piece of equipment. This is the dial pressure gauge. It's a precision instrument, so you need to really look after it. I keep it in the box it came in as well as the bubble wrap, and then I store it inside the canner so it's not getting bumped around in a cupboard. Now the dial gauge reads in PSI, so that's pounds per square inch of pressure, and the needle just moves around to the pressure that you want. And to adjust the pressure, it's the temperature, so you adjust your stove top as to what pressure you want depending on your altitude, but we'll get into that further down in another video. You're supposed to get them checked every 12 months to make sure that they're working properly so that you are canning at the right PSI. There are 4 parts to the dial indicator. You have the dial indicator itself, the seal, the washer and the nut. To put it on, you place it in the canning lid. I like my dial gauge to face my airlock so that I can see that it's under pressure and I can read it, and then it's venting out the side of the stove. So that's how I like to use it. Carefully turn that over. We pop the white rubber seal into the canner. So it's not above, it's not below, it's in the middle between the dial gauge and the canning lid. Then the washer goes on, and then the nut tightens up. The easiest way to put the dial gauge into the lid when you're not trying to show people on camera is to put the lid on the side, put the dial gauge in, and then pop your white seal, then your washer, and then screw up the nut at finger tight. So be careful of that dial gauge. Don't get it wet, don't submerge it under water or wash it. Next up we have the 3-piece pressure regulator. So they're the weighted gauges basically, and each one of these is 5 pounds. So depending on your altitude will depend on which you use. You might use all of them if you're at high altitude, and if you're under 1,000 feet you'll probably use 10. So it depends. You have to look that up, work out your altitude. This is something I put near where I'm canning so that I'm ready to use it when it's time. It doesn't go on straight away. You need to vent your canner for 10 minutes first before putting on the weight. We pop the first rack in on the bottom of the canner. This is to keep the jars off the bottom of the canner because they would overheat if they were directly on the bottom of the canner, and they would break and you would have food everywhere. It would be a big mess. So always use a rack on the bottom of your canner. And if you're going to stack the canner with your jars, then you put your next rack on top, and then you can put another round of jars on top. You still use the same amount of water if you're using one layer of jars or 2 layers of jars. It's the same. So there's the rack in the bottom. Once I've got my canner all set up ready to use, I place it on the hot plate, and that's when I usually add this water in. I use 3 quarts in my canner, and you have to check your manufacturer's guide for this because each canner is slightly different, I believe. I use warm water because the jars are usually warm straight out of the dishwasher or straight out of being washed, so they're already warm and the temperature difference won't be too great, so the jars won't crack. I also add in about 1/4 of a cup to 1/3 of a cup of white vinegar. This helps to prevent the canner from discolouring, as well as helping to keep your jars a bit cleaner. The canner is ready to go on the stovetop, and the lid, the second rack and the weighted gauge is ready to be on standby next to the stove, so that it's ready for me to use as soon as I've filled up the canner with all my jars. When it's time to put the canning lid on, you line the arrow on the lid up with the arrow on the handle. And twist. If it isn't as smooth as you'd like it to be, check the sealing ring and see if that's in good order. But if you've already done all your checks, it should be fine. The other things you'll need for canning is some canning jars, a funnel to help get the food in without slopping it everywhere, a bubble remover to get the bubbles out of the food, and this tool also measures the headspace that you require, which is really important to prevent siphoning. A cloth, a bowl of vinegar, so you can dip the cloth into the vinegar, wipe the jar rims. You'll need lids, which I usually have in a bowl of boiling water, a magnet to get them out. You can put them in place like that. Some rings. A jar lifter, because that just makes it easier putting them in the canner. And it's vital for getting them out of the canner because those jars are bubbling for hours afterwards. They are so hot. So there's no way you want to be touching them, and you want to have a good wood board or cutting board or something to place all the jars on so that they're not going to damage your table. And of course your canning book. And then all you need is some produce to can. I hope this video helped you to understand your Presto Pressure Canner a little bit more and to give you the confidence that it's not going to explode like the horror stories that we've heard. If you keep an eye on your canner when you're canning, I always personally sit in a chair watching it, or I actually bring a bed in and I lay on the bed in the kitchen area because I obviously have chronic fatigue and I get tired. So I make sure I don't go to sleep, but I'm resting my body and I can watch the dial gauge. So you do what you have to do to keep an eye on it, and don't be wandering off answering the door or getting busy doing other jobs while it's canning. I think that's important. There are safety functions in place so that the canning lid isn't going to explode, and I hope that this video has given you more confidence to get canning, even though we haven't done the canning part yet. Canning will be another video. So just look after your canner, have the spare parts on hand so that if you're all set up to can with your food ready and your canner has a part that's broken, you're not going to be wrecking and wasting all that food, because that would be just devastating. Make sure you read the instructions for your canner, because all canners can be slightly different. And when you're canning food, make sure you follow a modern book, because the older recipes are not necessarily safe for canning anymore. They've been doing scientific experiments and they're finding that some things just aren't as safe as what we used to think they were. I like to follow the rules with that sort of thing because botulism isn't something I want to mess around with, and I definitely don't want to kill anybody. So I'm up for safety. I like the Bald Blue book. This is a preserving book and it's fairly modern at the time I'm filming this. So I get the recipes out of here and follow these guidelines. I am no master canner, so I'm no expert. I don't have any qualifications on canning. I'm a fitter and turner by trade, so I understand the mechanical principles. But as far as canning goes, you need to follow the rules in your book. If you have any questions, or if I've missed something that I should have said in this video, please let me know. I hope you've got some value out of this video. Thanks for watching. See you next time.